Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to On the Other Side Leadership After Transition. Today, I have a wonderful guest. I've been hounding him for a while on LinkedIn. If for any of you that watch me know that I spend most of my time on LinkedIn trying to find the best people I can bring to give you information that's going to be helpful. And today, I feel like I hit a gold mine. I think you're going to feel the same once you hear the conversation. It's going to be exciting. I can't wait. So, without further ado, I'm going to bring on Mr. Jay Hicks. Jay, how are you today?
Good. How you doing, Jeff? It's great to be
I'm
here.
doing great. Thank you for coming. So, so where are you coming from? Where are you sitting at right now as we speak?
I am in Huntsville, Alabama. I've been up here about a year and heading back to Tampa shortly.
Outstanding. So Huntsville, Alabama. I've only been through Alabama a couple of times. Never made it to Huntsville, but I did get up to Birmingham, and I got to tell you, I got off the airplane. We went around the corner. There was this barbecue place, and probably some of the best barbecue I had outside of Texas, anyway. Even though I'm a New Yorker by birth, right?
Right? Yeah.
Uh,
That's what brought me to Alabama was a barbecue.
hey, it's not a bad thing to have brought you there, right? So what I want to do is I want to get right into the conversation because you truly have a lot to offer, and I just kind of want to hear your story a little bit. So if you would give me a little bit of a background about who Jay Hicks is, where you came in the military at, and then kind of a synopsis of your leadership positions while serving in the military.
Well, it's a lot. I could talk for days. Obviously, whenever you start talking about yourself, you got to cut it short. I went in '85 is a tanker and spent a couple years doing that and transitioned into Ordnance Corps under branch transfer. Got commissioned out of the University of Iowa in '85. My dad was Army. His last assignment was Rock Island, and subsequent to that, went to Germany. Um, did all kinds of neat S3 position over there, company command, and then did a during the collapse right after the Gulf War. We got cut up like Swiss cheese in Europe. We had 450,000 soldiers prior to the war, and then after the war, we were moving quickly towards. I think they're sitting at 60,000 today. And so I went with the unit. I was the ops officer, and all the field grades Idiwaba on me, and I had to do the move back to the United States. Actually, doing my first project schedule in Microsoft Project in about 1990 91 for that move back home, and
Mhm.
all we had to count for all the cats and dogs and suitcases and moms and dads and children and multiple flights back to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and spent a couple years there as continued to be the three, and then took over another company command and jumped out of there and spent other various assignments at Fort Hood, Texas, and then back to Europe, culminating kind of with an XO position. And I got into IT later, and kind of bounced back and forth between Ordnance Corps, which I was branch transferred to, and Functional Area 53.
Mhm.
Ultimately doing some excuse me, I had a phone call coming in there. Logistics information, and so believe it or not, I'm back at LOGSA for a short time here at Redstone Arsenal as a longtime retiree. I've been retired since 2005, and had about 12 years worth of contractor, defense contractor experience after I retired, and ultimately ending up here for a year and a half with my wife, who's finishing out her civil service career.
Okay. Okay. So let me ask you this question. So when you were getting ready to call it a day in '05, you made a decision. You and your wife discussed it. What was going to be your way ahead? What was that like for you to leave a career which spanned about 30 years, right? Uh, Pretty much right at that, no?
For 20 years, she has a
20 years.
slightly,
Did I say 30?
yeah,
So
slightly over
85,
20.
85 to '05.
Yeah.
So when you decided to get out of there, what was it? What was that conversation like with your wife?
Well, we were ready to go.
Yeah.
Everybody has a different career, and I know a lot of folks uh, loved the military and would stay for the rest of our life. But at the 20-year mark, we were ready to get out. So it was we had moved to Tampa at Central Command about 2.5 years before I retired, just in time to get there for the second Gulf War,
Mm.
and ultimately that's where we wanted to retire. So we felt very fortunate to be there, and we transitioned out of there, and I took my first contract position there at Central Command.
Okay. And did you know when you decided to retire that that's what you were going to do right away was jump from the uniform into a contract position? Is that something that kind of shook itself out as you were going through the process?
Well, that's a great question because none of us know. I don't think none of us have taken the time because, especially with the war going on, I worked up until the last day. It's like, what are
Mm.
you going to do? I don't know. And so we both actually had landed civil service jobs back in Germany about the time I was supposed to retire, and we debated whether or not to go back to Germany in civil service. And I write about some of this stuff in some of my books.
Mm.
But we chose to stay in Tampa as a defense contractor, and she had found a job as civil service in Tampa. But believe you me, there's been many conversations of, what if we had taken the civil service positions back in Europe? Our life
Yeah.
would have been very different because we still had the boys at home and everything then. So
Right,
all
right.
these things have got to be weighed out carefully, and that's just one of those that I don't want to say there's no regrets, but it is often thought of, what if type thing.
Mhm. Without a doubt. And it's fun, I got to tell you, coming to Tampa is like, to me, when people do PCS and decide to stay longer, it's baffling to me. And I say this because if you just think about what Tampa represents in a sense, right? I mean, when you're sitting there at Fort Hood or you're in Germany and you talk about getting out of the military or retirement, what you typically say at a beach with palm trees and breeze and water. And then and you get here and you're like, well, subliminal message or not, here it is. I'm getting out. That's the idea is that you're here already. So make
Yeah.
that easy switch, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's we don't want to do too big of an advertisement for Tampa, but I agree. I think a lot of people are drawn there. I certainly was,
Mm.
and it was hard to let go. It's hard to go
Right.
to Europe, even though Europe has always been one of my greatest loves. I
Oh
love
yeah.
love being there.
I do too. The only thing I don't like about Europe, it's inconvenient. I mean, at 2 o'clock in the morning when you're hungry, you can't go to the store like you can. Like Walmart's always open, right? So, but I know I do love Europe, and I actually appreciate. I spent 3 years or 2 years over in Stuttgart, and I really enjoyed Germany, everything, every part of it, to be honest. So for anybody, I mean, so you say you're a defense contractor and you've been doing it now for quite a while since you got out. Tell me, give me a little bit about kind of your thought process through it. I mean, as you started to progress within it, I mean, was it an idea to stay 5 years as a contractor, kind of save some money and do some things to get yourself into a different position, or was it going to be I'm going to do this until I'm done? I mean, what's kind of like that? I mean, for you specifically, how's that turned out? I guess you'd say.
Well, I write a lot about this in my book series because what happens is you just don't know. You don't know the jargon. You don't know the lay of the land. You don't understand corporate ladders. A lot of it's unfamiliar territory. So, in fact, when I got out, it was like, well, what are you going to do? So, well, I don't know. And I had a good friend of mine. He said, well, you ought to become a project manager. And of course, I had no idea what that was at the time. Even though that's what we had been doing in the military all along, and just didn't
Right.
call it project management.
Mhm.
But so I took a course or two in that, and sure enough, that became kind of my cup of tea for a while. And I started building project management organizations, both at United States Central Command and then later at USOCOM. And then after a while, I said, okay, this is good, but now I want to become a program manager,
Mm.
get a little more responsibility, which is kind of the growth chain. We have the growth ladders in the military, and there's very
Mm.
much a ladder in the civilian world, even in defense contracting.
Mm.
You can kind of see a way ahead. Because all of that can lead to business unit leaders and then on to corporate officers.
Yep.
So I decided that that's the way I would try to go, and I made some progress. But with contracts, as you know, you only have a job as long as the contract is good.
Yep.
As soon as there's competition and the contract goes away, then you're looking for a job again. And
Yeah.
so I did that. Worked with Lockheed Martin. I was with L3 for a while, BAE, then several small companies, Atlantic Digital, SAW, TST, and S4. And so after a while, you start to feel fatigued and beat up, just like you would in the military, from being
Right.
deployed all the time.
Mm.
And that's kind of what gave me the desire and the impetus to write books to help folks out that were kind of going through the transitional situations that I had been through, and tried to write it as a concerned uncle. Here's some things you can learn from me. You don't have to do anything with it if you don't want to, but it's just a couple of things maybe keep you out of hot water. And that's when I developed with my co-author Sandy Cobb the Transitioning Military series.
Yeah, so let's talk. I mean, I'm really interested in that, and I got to tell you, I'll probably be one of your biggest advocates in the Tampa area for pushing it out because, just like I mean, you talk about 2005 PMP, right? It's such a hot commodity. I mean, almost everywhere you go in the contracting world, you hear it constantly. Trying people pushing it, even the GS and the civil servant area pushing PMP because I think it all not doesn't just give you or market you better and put you in a place to be successful from a marketing perspective, but it puts you into a place to be successful from a learning perspective. It teaches you a different way. Although yes, we've been doing it that way in the military. This actually gives you a structured format of it in a sense. And it's so because of that, I want you to tell me about your books. I want you to tell the audience so I can go out here and make sure people are aware of it and where to find it and all that good stuff. But number 5 was done this past winter, you said?
Yes, as a matter of fact, it was, and probably the one that I'm most proud of because it's for combat arms. It's called the Transitioning Combat Arms Professional, and I'm very excited about that book because I spent some time as a tanker. Sergeant Major of the Army Jack Tilley was my co-author for that book, and it's all about trying to help folks that really don't know what they want to do after the Army.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really for anybody in that category, but it's specifically written for the infantrymen, the armor, and the artillerymen. So highly recommend that book if you're in that category. You're not quite sure yet what you want because we cover a lot of territory in that book.
Yeah.
The first book is specifically about project management and the things you need to know about becoming a project manager. It's known as the Transitioning Military Project Manager. And it goes through the day in the life of a project manager. It does the corporate ladder, how you can progress from being a project manager, and how to get started, how to take the exam, how to get educated, how to get education paid for.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's a chapter on comparative analysis of civil service, contracting, and corporate world. So you can see some of the pros and cons and the goodness of those type things. And then, of course, it gets, as with all the books, chapter 5 pulls it all together and looks at the assessments that you conducted during the book and tells you where you need to progress a little more and tells you which areas you should emphasize on your resume and during the interview.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
that's I got to tell you, and I just want to comment on that because I've read some books recently, right? I mean, I don't have them, but I probably read about 25 books in the past maybe 4 months just on business and some other things, right? But mostly business, and it's really great. The books provide you with knowledge, but the one thing that it tends to not tell you is how. Like when you're looking at, you don't got to tell me why. I know why I'm doing this. You can don't tell me what. I mean, but they're giving you a lot of the I guess you say the stuff, the ingredients, but not the full package. They want you to ask how, so they want you to call them or buy this new thing. I like the fact that in your book you allow them to work at some things, so at the end of it they can actually look at it and say, here's something. I mean, this is tangible. I can take this with me and now go forward and figure it out. I mean, and that's important for any book, in my opinion, anyway.
And those books, the whole series, has a lot of pointers, sending you to different locations to get at some more detailed information if you desire. But in the appendices, we also have translators, which are extremely important to be able to translate the military vernacular into the commercial world. Such as in the project management book, we talk about we have a Rosetta Stone and a lexicon,
Right.
both of those taking the military planning process and converting it to the PMBOK, which is the
Okay.
project management body of knowledge. And then, of course, we also just take out military terminology. Words such as an operation really is, in a lot of ways, a mission is a lot like a project. And then we start
Yep.
looking at the vernacular, and because you've got to have that to be able to fill out the application,
Right.
to do your resume, to take the tests, to get the PMP, and to be able to speak literally with the interviewer. And so those things are important, and we try to give a good flavor of that within the book series and help you along that way. But again, there's no hard sell on any of it. It's like, hey, this is just some things you might want to consider.
That's awesome. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the link and put it on this Facebook thread. As people take a look at it, they'll be able to click on it, and they'll take them right to the book, all five. What was interesting, you made mention about the combat arms one. So Jack Tilley was a guest on my show last February. We spoke, and you got to love him, Sergeant of the Army, and just he's very much in touch with people, I like that. I mean, just a really approachable guy. And we talked a lot about, I'm a comm guy, right? I mean, I would never consider myself an IT guy. I mean, I was a radio guy, and then I got so far away from the communications world. But comm guys, I don't want to say they have it easy, but throughout their time in the military, they're getting certified, whether it be, basic Net Plus or Security Plus or whatever more advanced certificates they get. Then when they get out, there could be system administrators, network administrators, whatever it may be. But for the combat arms guys, it's a lot of times, especially having a good conversation with a tanker or an infantry guy, they'll say, what am I going to be, a cop? I mean, everybody wants to be a cop. That's all I'm good for. They're trying to find things that can equate to what they did in the military. And the only thing that they always talk about is the limit of what their jobs can be. But I don't believe that to be true. I just think that it needs to be, some from your book that they can look at to see what might help them, but just to get a little bit more guidance from people that are outside that have already done that transition, that there's more to life than being a police officer. If that's what you think you're stuck at doing, you can do other things,
Well, it's so funny you said that, Jeff, because that's exactly how I opened the combat arms book. Everybody thinks you'd be a great cop. But if you think there's more to life than doing that, then read on. Even though there's nothing wrong with being a police officer. In fact, it's very admirable. But if you want more, keep reading this book, because we're going to look at the other things you did in the military and see what your likes and desires were. And then I'm going to show you how the career fields line up with that in the commercial world.
That's awesome. And the other thing that I liked how you said is you were talking about the ladder, the corporate ladder, if you will. Some people talk about a corporate ladder or being equivalent to ours. I think ours is very definitive, structured in a certain way when you're in the military, right? And E1 to E9 and then O1 to whatever, you can climb it, and kind of the things that you have to do in order to check the block, if you will, and you have to be successful at doing those things. And the corporate structure, there's a lot of, it's not just a straight ladder. It doesn't just go straight up. It kind of goes, parallel to the ground, up and over. And there's a lot of different ways it weaves around, but the fact that there is progression. And I think that's what some people in the leaving the military kind of get a little nervous about, because they're used to moving towards a goal or towards an object of higher responsibility, but sometimes they just don't understand how it works out there. And I think that, you had made mention of the ladder, and I think it's important that people do understand there is still a ladder. It gives you purpose, if you will.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think what happens is people get outside and sometimes they don't realize that there is structure, because it can seem overwhelming at first, but there definitely is a methodology and a structure to how things progress. But there's nobody that's going to put you on a definitive corporate ladder, or because when your time and grade is coming, when your next promotion's due up, or when you're going to get kicked out if you don't make the next promotion.
Right.
Those kind of rules don't exist. Much more nebulous, but there's definitely a ladder for climbing.
Right.
If that's what you're wanting to do,
Yeah, and I think that's also a very good point, though, is that is that what you want to do, and that's as you start to transition, you have to think about that. Do I want to start a career again and start moving towards the top of whatever career I choose, or do I just want to get a job, which is again not a problem, but because that career allows you to start over and start that climb. And you know, I think someone like me, I need to climb. I want to climb. I always am looking for something better. It's not to be better than people, but I'm always looking for more. You know, that's just what I've always wanted to do. So for me, it's pretty simple. But for other folks, they don't want the responsibility. They just like to come in and go as they please, and hey, it works for them. More power to them.
Yeah, I think one thing you said, Jeff, that resonates and I've written about is the fact that as you're transitioning, especially if you happen to be retiring, one of the things that you need to do is sit back and look at the terrain and figure out how you're going to navigate and what is it that you've always wanted to do. Because now it's your time. Now it's your opportunity, perhaps, to synchronize your desires and goals and objectives with something that is what you've always wanted to do, but felt like you had to put on the shelf for a while. And if you can work through that, it's very good because you'll find that that's really your life's work, and that perhaps that's the reason you're here, and will enable you to get up every day feeling energized the rest of your life if you're doing something you love,
Right.
rather than just taking the first contract job that comes along because you feel like you've got to put food on the table for the family.
Mm-hmm.
So you may not have that option if you're not retiring, if you don't have the assets or whatever. But if you do, sit back and relax and think a little bit about where you're going and what it is ultimately you want to do in your life, you know?
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think that, I mean, you know, for me, talking to retirees as they're getting ready to retire or they're preparing to retire, I like talking to them because they're putting their plans together and they understand they have that catcher for them if they that little bit of a soft spot, I guess you say, for, you know, their retirement, if their pension is there. So I talk to them about their plans, and it's really, I mean, I just really enjoy talking to them because some have been really good with their money over the years, and some haven't, and some have great aspirations to be something, and some just want to kind of ride off into the sunset, which to me, to each his own, is good. My concern always comes for the guys that spent, you know, 4, 6, 8 years in, no degrees. And, you know, I mean, obviously, you know, they've already put themselves behind the eight ball in a lot of ways, right, while they were serving. And now they're going to go out. And I get very concerned for them. But, you know, it's just interesting. How can I be as concerned for them as they have to be more concerned, right? So, you know, they always have the way ahead. Sometimes it makes me nervous, you know, but hey, I like to have those conversations nonetheless, you know.
Right. So I think the equalizer is certification.
Yeah.
So you get these young guys coming out. Maybe they don't have the education yet, but they can quickly find themselves in a lucrative and viable position, and especially if they have a desire to move towards a career field that has certification. By getting out there and learning how to get credentialed so that they become viable and valid within the commercial workforce, and you don't have to go to school and get a 4-year degree with the GI Bill. You know, instead, if you're needing to provide quicker, get certified and move out. Man, that's a great way to go for a lot of young men and women.
Sure is. And you know, there's so many programs out there, and it's just really, that's, I think, one of the most exciting things for me, that over the last year, I had made mention to you before we talked about traveling to San Diego and traveling to San Antonio and Washington and Kentucky. I've traveled, and I'm amazed how many programs that are out there. I'm not amazed. I'm a little disappointed in the fact that they're not always so there, you know, I mean, like, it's visible. Sometimes you have to search for them, you know, and it is what it is. I get it. If you want something, you have to look for it, right? But I like things to be right there plastered. I mean, think about over the past 6 months. I mean, just on LinkedIn alone, you see ads, or not ads, but posts for Veterati. You see, I mean, PMI Tampa has been a big one down here over the past 3 months, which is good. It's good to see. But there's a bunch of programs that you're starting to see pop up here and there. Down in Texas, there's Centurion Military Alliance, GI Jobs up in Pennsylvania, and you're just seeing these things pop up. And I love seeing it because they exist, but they're everywhere. So I mean, there are a lot more resources, I think, now today in 2018 than obviously when you decided to not, I was about to say escape as if you were trying to escape, but exit the military in 2005. But I think we continually progress in the transition process on the installations through the Soldier for Life program and TAPS, but as well as outside, because there's people that truly see the struggle that people are having. They're trying to make it a little bit easier on that exit.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think you're spot on. The knowing the amount of resources that are out there, um, there's you could you can't shake a stick without hitting something,
Mm-hmm.
and so I feel very fortunate for young men and women transitioning today. There are so many tremendous benefits. I've got a good friend out of Chicago uh, that's built a company called ProjectRoad.com, and he's a real patriot. He never served, but he loves veterans, and he offers $300 worth of online courseware for $17.76. 17.76, and
Wow.
it's called ProjectRoad.com. If you're aware, and many viewers probably are, you have to have 35 hours of project management training to begin doing the application and assessment to get the PMP certification.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very inexpensive way to do that. And there's a lot of organizations offering veteran training for project management, amongst others. You read about that in my IT book on Security Plus and other certifications available for veterans and programs for that. We hit on it again in the cybersecurity book. And of course, logistics is our second book. And there's a lot of certifications on supply chain management and things of this nature that we discuss in the logistics book and how to go about getting those.
Okay. So down here in the Florida area anyway, and I have accessibility to some folks, and I'm going to take some of your books, especially the logistics ones. I have a bunch of guys and gals actually that are separating, that are logisticians. And it's funny because one friend of mine had made mention. He goes, but I don't want to work in a warehouse, and I was like, okay, well, where do you want to work? I'm not sure, just not a warehouse. I'm like, all right, guy. What are you doing? And we talked. I mean, we probably talked for about 2.5 hours. I'm not. I don't have a logistics background, but I do see things from a different perspective, and there are other avenues. But I'd like them to see these things that you offer, so they can look through it and just see a different perspective. I think that's what a lot of us tend to forget. We think that we're pigeonholed into what we did and solely what we did, so we stop looking outside and we just keep going with those blinders on, right? As opposed to saying, if I look from a different perspective, I'd probably see a little bit more. And things like the book are definitely a great perspective to look at. I mean, just a great tool and a resource to use. So I'll definitely bring that down for them to see it, because I can't answer this question for them. So I'm gonna send it to you.
Well, that's great. Yeah, the books for the viewers are available at larger military exchanges around the world. And of course, on Amazon.com, you can find them. And my website, Great Transitions for You, that's GR8 Transitions, number 4, and the letter U.com. So you can get my books in any of those routes. I understand they're available through Barnes & Noble online and Walmart online as well. But the main thing is you can go down the exchange and pick it up and feel it and touch it and look at it and see if it's for you or not. And I think I was really glad to be able to do that, so that guys and gals don't go out and buy something blind on the internet. This way they can actually touch it and feel it. Military clothing sales stores at AAFES.
Oh, that's great. I mean, and that's a huge point too. Is I think, again, I know I'd made mention that I always say LinkedIn. I just find that to be such a useful tool for just a myriad of things. And it's not just networking, it's to see what people are posting, because, there are people that take advantage of veterans too, right? There's people that, if you put the word veteran in something, or military in something, it's obviously going to pull on the heartstrings a little bit, but it's also going to say, hey, you want to help me? I'm getting out. You want to help me? And then while you look through the content, it's not always the greatest information. And sometimes it's actually the absolute worst information. And there's a lot of folks out there trying to help people not go that route, which, there's Michael Quinn, who's out there on LinkedIn. And I tell you, I watch everything he puts out there, because it's obviously about LinkedIn for the most part. He's got a lot of knowledge, and he really genuinely cares. So I watch him, and just, be careful of this. But I also watch you. I watch just a bunch of folks, and I like the fact that you put your books in the PX or somewhere where someone can go in there, get word of mouth, say this is a great book, and have people go out and actually look into it because it is beneficial. I mean, again, what's a wasted resource, is it sucks. I mean, because people don't even understand that they exist. So it's nice to know that they're there. But I'll make sure that I put the word out for all y'all.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you. And same with your podcast. I think you're helping a lot of people, and I'm very impressed with what you got going on, and I'm looking forward to listening to some of the other podcasts as well.
Yeah, it's fun. I got to tell you that when I was going through my transition, that's kind of how this all started. Is that I was listening. I was in a room, with a bunch of folks, and I always knew I was going to be an entrepreneur. I knew that I wanted to own a business. I didn't know how, but I knew I wanted to, and it wasn't going to have to be right now, but it was eventual. I didn't really care about a resume because if I own my own business, I don't have to write a resume, right? Well, that turned out to be false. That's a false narrative. Write your own resume. That happens, right? But as I'm sitting there, and I'm driven also, so I'm not going to fail. I got 3 kids, a 4th one on the way. My mother and my mother-in-law will live with me, so I am the provider for the family, right? So I know that I have to do something to make sure my family's taken care of. But I'm looking around the room, and there were a lot of folks in there that just weren't sure, and it just didn't seem like they were getting it. They needed more. And what I was trying to do was provide them voices for them to hear from not just Sergeant Major of the Army, which is nice, but Sergeant Major of the Army was going to be okay. When he got out of the Army, there wasn't a job he probably couldn't get. You know what I mean? I mean, there's people that don't have to struggle when they get out because it's given. But I wanted to talk to tech sergeants in the Air Force and master sergeants in the Marine Corps. And I wanted to get, I mean, even captains and majors, lieutenant colonels, because every perspective is different. Because what I realize is that I have lieutenant colonels that are listening to my show. I have colonels that are listening to my show. I have sergeants major that are listening to my show. I got privates that are listening to my show. And as those people said, hey, can you reach out to this guy or can you have him on? Yeah, I'd love to. And it actually just went further from there because all I was doing was just having nice conversations with Jay Hicks in Alabama. And that's all it was for me. Is this is something I would do if you were sitting in my living room, just having a conversation, but be able to provide that for people that really need help. It's been more than I ever expected. So I'm truly blessed with that, to be honest with you.
That's wonderful. Yeah,
it is. So I want to ask you, I kind of want to, from a leadership perspective. So you served in some significantly, I mean, some good positions, right? You were a commander of troops. You were a leader of people within the military, and you leave and you go into the contracting world. What are some of the things, even outside? I mean, even dealing with just in life in general, what are some of the characteristics or some of the qualities of a leader that you were able to that you would come out and take with you on the other side of this uniform and say that they were important for you? To be a good contributing member to society, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, it's a neat question because if you flip it around, those same traits that we display, our ethos, the things that are drilled into us when we're in training and then we know how to execute upon when we're in leadership position in the military, are those same traits that they look for in the project management world. And I always go back to project management because that's kind of the bread and butter of what I did for many years after I got out. But they're looking for a communicator, somebody that's organized, somebody that can schedule, people that can talk, not only right to your subordinates, but to leadership as well, and be able to do that well and get the point across so that people completely understand. Nothing drives me crazier than to listen to folks that sometimes have not served in the military, and they give out ambiguous directions. They don't really seem to, they just kind of generalize stuff. And I find myself, and I'm sure you have as well, and a lot of our viewers, not only frustrated when they hear things like that, but they turn the corners table on them and say, did you just say you want me to go do X, Y, and Z? Because we're looking for specifics to go execute. We don't want a bunch of nebulous stuff and have to, think forever about it. So upward mentorship and bringing your military capabilities to bear on the commercial entity without being a heavy is very, very important. And there's a lot of organizations, commercial world, corporations that are looking for that kind of guy or gal that can be a natural leader while not being a heavy and get the job done.
Right. It's interesting. And the interesting part I find is I was at I'm an associate instructor at 4 Block down here in Tampa. So it's great. It's a military transition thing for student veterans. It's an awesome organization. The same question was asked to a group of hiring managers that weren't military. And the question was asked for military directed people because they're all military folks. So we asked them, what do you feel that the military folks bring in to from a leadership perspective that helps them or hurts them? And it's fun. So they went through and they talked about things. They actually spoke greatly in detail about some of the things you had just made mention. The one thing they said, the one guy, which kind of made me laugh a little bit, said confidence. And he said the confidence, but it was a negative. And I was like, it truly blew my mind, because he said, it's not that you're too confident. It's the confidence came with something. And it wasn't just it was the manner in which everything was spoke about, everything was talked about. It was almost driven in a manner in which was just not too appealing. And I know I got to tell you, Jay, I left there that night and I drove. I'm a confident person. I promise you. You would never see me in a position to where I'm stammering or not too sure of myself. I'm very confident. But it struck me as really odd that he said that. And I promise you, hours. I just put it in my head. So I had to call my buddy who was there and say, hey, can you explain to me what he meant by that? And he said he used the wrong word. It wasn't confidence that he was talking about. I mean, it was more for the arrogance, and it went on and to put me at ease, because I was like, well, if that's a deterrent, something that's going to take detract from my abilities, well, I'm kind of in a bad situation here.
Yeah, and I think arrogance. There's a lot of one of the things that I try to do in this position is try to help mentor and educate civilians that don't really understand the military, because there's a lot of misnomers,
Yeah.
and one thing that they perceive is that we are arrogant,
Mm-hmm.
and they confuse arrogance and confidence sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because, as we know, most of us that have been in the military for a while know about teamwork and helping your buddy out, and are very compassionate, on the battlefield, off the battlefield. And I guess I can understand how some would confuse uh, overconfidence with arrogance. But again, understanding the environment, and again, not being a heavy
Yeah. Yeah.
is very, very important. Watching people's reaction and knowing what's going on in the environment, and most of us are pretty good at that. We all pick up on visual cues pretty well, being in the service.
Without a doubt. I mean, it goes back to knowing your soldiers and just knowing your surroundings, I guess, is the most important part. And definitely cultural changes and cultural shifts are a little different. I mean, I think we deal with them in the military, not as much as out there or out here, excuse me, because, no matter, things may change, but the culture is still the culture within the military. When you leave, different things, it's a little different. So you got to be a good fit, I guess you'd say. And it's kind of a matter of just opening your ears a little bit, less mouth, more ears, so you can kind of feel your way around the organizations that you're looking at. That's interesting.
Exactly.
So what do you think? And I mean, in your opinion, what I guess you'd say, what sums up a great leader for you? What is your idea of a great leader?
Well, I think of Mike Rowe, somebody that's not afraid to do what it takes. And, you're not going to go ask your employees, or certainly in the military, we're not going to ask our subordinates to do something we wouldn't be willing to pick up the same thing and go do. And Mike Rowe talks about that a good bit. I'm a big fan of his, and he really lays it out. He thinks that a lot of folks today, are afraid to do this or afraid to do that. Afraid to get their fingers dirty, And both my boys worked hard. They're both in the military now. And most of the folks I've ever known that served in the military are not afraid to work, and they get the job done. And they know how to lead folks in doing the job. And I think that a great leader is going to be that kind of person, one that will help and get things done, and won't just stand there and bark out orders.
Right. Good deal. So if you had the opportunity to give transitioning service members. You have the stage. So this goes back into what I was saying earlier. So if you're talking to my listeners right now, and there's 5,000 of them that are listening, this is your moment to be on stage and look at them all, right? And say to them, give them one piece of advice as they're getting ready to walk out onto the other side to be a civilian. What is that piece of advice you would give them?
Start early. Start as early as possible, and don't be afraid to take the time to do what needs to be done. And I realize a lot of us are even deployed, perhaps listening to this right now. Some of us are going to work to the very last day. Some of them are going to start a year early and take every transition class they can. It's a good happy medium. If you need to take time in the evening to prepare for a certification to help get you ready, do it. But don't wait to the end to get started. Otherwise, especially if you need to work, you could find yourself in a bind within a few months.
Right, right. And it's really, it's funny. It's funny because now I'm not in it. So what I mean is, I've had leaders with that sense of obligation that had to work until the last day. You were one of those folks that were working towards the last day because of the fact that the war was just starting. And I was not. I mean, I worked, don't get me wrong, but I actually took that time. I probably took about 6 months to where I work. I mean, I was at work, but I would go and do a lot of stuff to prepare myself, take some classes here and there, just about life, right? Because I really wanted to have things in a situation so my wife wouldn't be so worried or whatever the case may be. Me personally, if I was alone, I don't think I'd gone to one class. I'd have just went. I'd make it happen. I'd sleep on someone's couch if I had to. I had more responsibility, so I had to be a little bit concerned for that, right? But as I'm looking at it now, and as I've watched, I've been to 8 homeless shelters throughout this time, throughout the year, and talked to about 1,327 or 28. I didn't write the number down of the homeless guys that were there, and gals, by the way. And it was horrible because 100% of the ones that I talked to, this isn't 100% of all of them, but 100% of the ones that I talked to were E7 and below enlisted folks, right? So as I was talking to them, I mean, it just hit me. I mean, it was very, I don't want to say an emotional thing, but it was emotional because I'm like, man, because you remember they were in a uniform at some point and they came to formation on time and they did all the, I mean, they were taken care of, right? And whatever the reasoning is, because there's a myriad of them, it's not just one. So I don't have the answer and the cure for it, but I just think about all these transition classes that are going on all day. I mean, 60,000 plus service members are getting out monthly. I mean, it's a huge number. And I just think to myself, man, I hope that they started early. Like not the early that I started where I was kind of doing my own little things, but I didn't budget. I didn't make a budget for myself. I didn't check on a TSP or I didn't do any of the things. I didn't worry about life insurance. I wasn't so concerned about the tax bracket changes and all these other things that I mean, because I never heard of it. I mean, I never had to worry about that stuff. Right. So my wife, thankful for me anyways, that she's never been in the military. So she was a civilian forever. So all these things were common knowledge to her. So she got to take care of all that stuff for me. You know what I mean? But there's a lot of stuff that when you get out that you don't take in consideration, especially the younger guys, and whether that's the 15-year vet or the 10-year, 8-year, and so on and so forth. But you saying to start early is probably one of the best pieces of advice that they can get, and also asking the right questions. They don't know what they don't know, so they don't know what they're supposed to ask, but it's just starting early and finding the right people to talk to. And it's people like you, Jay, that I'm thankful that you're on here right now, because that's important. That they have to have someone to go to, and you're one of those guys, and I love it.
Well, thank you for what you're doing.
Too easy. Now you have to go and tell me a story. So at the end of every show I do, you can't make this stuff up moment. So this you can't make this up moment can be funny. There's something that happened to you when you're in uniform that you can remember like it was yesterday, that maybe like your friends wouldn't believe it happened because it just isn't normal. Or it could be just a really cool story that happened while you were in the military. But if you want to share one with us, I'd love to hear one.
Well, in all candor, you gave me the question early, and I thought about it. What in the world would I share? Because I hate to do it, but I always like to give a little bit of advice. So I'm going to kind of intertwine the two. And one is the main thing is that for me is that networking is so important. Um, I met people throughout my whole military career, and kept track of people throughout my whole military career. Now you do that partially because of a security clearance, But I did it also because I truly love some of the folks that I served with over the years. And LinkedIn has been a tremendous asset to help me stay in touch with folks. Far better than an address book because that's something you got to manually update yourself. And some of our younger guys don't even know what an address book is, probably. But most of us, especially myself, have been around a while. You manually updated an address book for years and years until LinkedIn came along. So all of these people I grew up with, not all of them, but a tremendous number of them have been highly successful people. And knowing them has given me great pride and pleasure. And then when they find out that I'm all about trying to help people in transition, uh, they're, Jay, what can I do to help? And so many of these folks that I've been in touch with over the years have helped me. You can read about them in my books. They've given me personal stories. They've written forwards for me. They've been co-writers in books, and just been a real pleasure staying in touch with folks. And brilliantly, I think young people may do a better job at this than I did because I didn't really learn the value of all this till the last 10 or 15 years. My son, who's in the military, is just a superb networker at 27 years old and knows how to stay in touch with everybody and uses that to his advantage a great deal between deployments and different stints. He's a guardsman, so guardsmen learn much earlier than a lot of active duty folks on the challenges and complications of employment between active duty stints, and so a lot we can learn from them as well. So I hope that's it's not exactly a funny story, but if you're a great networker or you're learning how to be, your life is going to be much easier, and I highly recommend you pursue that with a vengeance because it will pay tremendous dividends down the road.
It doesn't have to be a funny story. That's awesome. And I'm going to tell you something. There's some benefits to being a guardsman, and when it comes to networking, not just the understanding of the job opportunities and struggles, but a lot of our active duty folks are, I don't want to say they're not prohibited, but there's a lot of negative things being said about certain things on social media. So they kind of stand off. They don't get on LinkedIn because LinkedIn's not going to help with an NCOER or an award. So they're not worried about LinkedIn so much. Facebook, they don't want to put too much stuff on Facebook because their commander is going to get on them for putting too much stuff. So it's almost as if they're not paying much attention to the social media aspects from that, but they are as far as keeping in touch with people that they're going that they're serving with, understanding how to turn that into a positive thing and a very I don't maybe lucrative is too strong of a word, but that the networking ability on these sites are huge and they pay dividends. I mean, just like you had made mention, you just staying in touch with people that have become so successful. I've got plenty of friends on LinkedIn that urged me to get on it for over a year and a half. I got on it last January, didn't even understand it until about June. And then since June, I've been really, as you say, attacking it with vengeance because it's an amazing tool. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much. So that's going to be all of our time. But I want to tell you one thing, Jay. I am truly thankful that you took your time to spend time with us today. I mean, I do want to thank you from the bottom of my heart and from everybody that's listening and is going to listen. Thank you so much, Jay.
Well, you're very welcome, and I'm very proud and happy for what you're doing because I know it's going to affect a lot of folks. And I just wanted to mention also as we conclude, please link in with me or follow me on LinkedIn. Lots of valuable articles out there that I've written to help you during your transition. I've dedicated my life to your transition, so please do that and let me know. Let me know you're out there because I do care.
Outstanding. So if any of you get together with Jay on LinkedIn, send him a message before. Just make sure you send a message. Say you met him or you heard about him on this show. Put my name as a hashtag, and I'll get like the proceeds. No, don't put my name. Just send him a message. I'm only joking there. That's just a teasing thing. But no, I truly appreciate you, Jay. Again, thank you, and I'll make sure that that book gets some public knowledge on my page here and my on my own personal page too, because it's important, as well as on my LinkedIn page. So
Jeff, I can't thank you enough for the time today. Thank you so much.
thank you again. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So until next time, when I see you on the other side.